Hello, I'm Michelle Bailey, the Senior Program Manager and Accessibility Coordinator for the Vermont Arts Council. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to help us review the Arts Project grant applications. This brief orientation will help introduce you to the program and the review process. Arts Project grants support nonprofit organizations, municipalities, and schools in their efforts to add vibrancy to Vermont communities by providing equal and abundant access to the arts. Our grant awards range from $1,000 up to $4,000, and there is no match required. Vermont 501c3 nonprofits, municipalities, and schools may apply for project grants. Groups without a tax-exempt status may apply using a fiscal agent. We fund performances, exhibits, screenings, readings, fairs, public art projects, and festivals that focus on including new audiences, and public art projects that commission an artist for the creation of new work where the community is engaged in the planning, presentation, and/or fabrication and presentation of that work. Creative experiences that are designed to include a specific group or a certain age, income, gender, race, or ability, or to encourage interaction among those groups. And accessibility accommodations that enable people with disabilities to participate in arts programs. The Arts Council itself does have some program priorities, which we see reflected in these guidelines a bit, and that is to provide equal and abundant access to the arts, expand access to the arts and cultural activities for all Vermonters, and really thinking about what are those barriers to participation. Is it transportation? Is there a language barrier? Are there accommodations that you need to make programming that welcome people with various disabilities to participate in those programs and activities? And maybe it's socioeconomic barriers or other types of barriers. And then creative placemaking projects. These projects really are about place-based projects that address broader community goals where cross-sector partners are coming together to achieve something that they can't do alone. Our program criteria has two broad categories. First of all, we have project quality and impact, which is 70% of the review. And with this area, it is the quality and impact will be evaluated by high artistic merit, that it offers a rewarding and/or positive arts experience for the participants and/or community. It demonstrates meaningful community partnerships between arts and non-arts groups that enhance the quality of the project, and strives to remove or reduce barriers to participation for under-resourced groups. The proposed project also has a project management criteria, which is 30% of the review. The proposed project is clearly defined and planned with a realistic timeline, has strong community leadership in place to manage the project, demonstrates effective outreach and promotional plans, is compliant with access and non-discrimination policies, and has a clear and reasonable project budget where artists, creatives are appropriately compensated. Applicants should provide a clear budget that demonstrates the feasibility of the project. You should look for realistic costs for all aspects of the project, but also consider costs for accessibility services and needs, and that there is compensation for artists and creatives. And when we say appropriately compensated, we ask you to use your best judgment in the context of the program, the project itself, the community, and what the applicant is trying to achieve, and decide if this feels like it's an appropriate compensation. We also asked applicants to provide support materials. This can include up to 5 support materials in the form of images, PDFs, or audio, visual, and video links. The support materials should help you understand the artistic quality and merit of the project. Applicants should be sharing samples of the proposed artist work evidence of their teaching abilities, etc. We also advise applicants who may not have the exact artists for events selected yet, because maybe they're taking place a full year from now, to provide samples of the artists that they are hiring for a similar event this summer, or samples of artists they may be considering for that future activity, or sample artists that they have hired in the past, to demonstrate the level and quality and experience that their audiences or participants could expect from artists from the next year or the next project. These materials can also demonstrate and highlight the project or the organization and its work. Applicants can share brochures, posters, information from past projects or the upcoming event, highlighting the organization and the work that they have done or will do, and these materials should back up statements and information that may be provided in the narrative. So to summarize, basically we're looking at all the criteria, but we really want to know that within the context of the project, that it's a quality arts experience, has meaningful outreach to new and underrepresented populations. The barriers to participation have been addressed, and these can be funded with the grant. Community partnerships between arts and non-arts organizations, thinking what can they achieve together that they can't achieve alone. The event or activity is accessible to people with various disabilities, and that artists are being compensated for their work. And there are lots of helpful tips in the application preview that's as part of your panelist guide. There's more tips for applicants that we share in there that might also help you if that's of interest to you. You can take a look at that before you begin your review as well. So the timeline, they had a deadline of May 15th. We will be meeting on June 28th. And then in July and August, our Board of Trustees will be reviewing all the funding recommendations from this and other grant programs. And we will notify all applicants by email by the end of August. And any projects that we fund should take place between September 1st of 2023 and August 31st of 2024. Next, I'll turn to what we call the 5 C's of the application review. This information is also in your panelist guide. The first is confidentiality. While reviewing applications and during the panel meeting, everything that is discussed should stay confidential. The comments submitted with your scores and the notes taken during the panel meeting will be shared as feedback to applicants. However, the comments are paraphrased and your names will not be attributed to specific comments. Vermont is a small state and your names will eventually be released as part of our process, but if anyone contacts you with questions, don't feel you have to respond. Just tell them that there were a lot of applicants and you don't remember all the details of their application specifically and refer them to me. Second is conflict of interest. Simply knowing an applicant does not constitute a conflict. However, if there is a family relationship, employee or contractor relationship, or if you will benefit financially from this grant, then there would be a conflict. Also, sometimes just the appearance of a conflict can be enough that you might want to step out of the discussion and scoring. Even if you feel you might be objective, sometimes that perception can be strong enough to make that happen. So please let me know if you think there's a conflict with any of these applicants, and I will be sure to recuse you from that review. Or if you're unsure and you want to talk to me, I can help you make that determination. Next is context. When looking at applications, it may be difficult to evaluate a really big established organization relative to a small organization in a rural community, for example. Rather than comparing them to each other or the types of projects compared to one another that are very different, keep in mind the context of each project and ask yourself if this is a good investment. Is the work reasonable and impactful in the community, in the context of the group that they serve and the kind of organization that they are? For example, if this is a project from a community theater group with performers who may not be professionally trained actors, consider if in the context of community theater, is this a good quality production and a project that will have impact in that community? Or if there's a project where process is more of the focus than product, is the experience a high quality experience for the participants? Next is consistency. While we have our own biases and experiences, recognize that and stay consistent with yourself when evaluating these applications. If you feel that one criterion is more important than the others, then make sure you're consistent in your evaluation throughout all the applications. You might also find on the day of the panel meeting that you're scoring higher or lower than the other panelists. As long as you are consistent with yourself, all should be fine. And then finally, the fifth C is criteria, which I've gone over already in detail. But just be sure you make comments and scores that show how the applicant addressed or didn't address the criteria in their application, along with their strengths and weaknesses in our online system. Excuse me, the Council is committed to improving diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility to all our programs and activities. In that spirit, we've incorporated a document into the panel guide that asks each of you to explore your own biases in the context of this program and in the context of each application through a series of self-reflection questions in each of these areas. There's only two or three in each heading, so please take a look at those questions in the panel guide. These questions are related to these three areas. First of all, diversity, the extent to which an organization has people from diverse backgrounds represented throughout, the recognition of those individual differences. Equity, using the principles of fairness and ethics to apply justice to a given circumstance or set of conditions. And three, the inclusion, the active, intentional, and ongoing engagement of the diversity of an organization, organizational culture, and production of art in order to provide equal access, well-being, and a sense of belonging for all members of the organization or participants in a project. These framing questions can help us examine and increase our awareness of our unintentional biases. And we're committed to improving our work in this area, but we know we have a long way to go. And at the end of this process, we'd like to discuss ways to improve the program and the communities that we serve. This tool is still a work in progress, and we welcome your feedback. So the review process. Prior to the meeting, be sure that you log into the online granting system early or now to be sure you can access those applications. Sometimes folks have some technical issues and we can help you resolve them to make sure you have plenty of time to review those applications. And then be sure to score and comment on all your primary and secondary reader assignments no later than Monday, June 26th at the end of the day. We will then weight those scores accordingly, average them, and develop a list of ranked scores and applications. Those that clearly scored highly will be held out for funding consideration with no necessary further discussion. Those that clearly scored low will be dropped from funding consideration and will not have discussion. And that's why it's really important for you to provide constructive feedback in your comments so that we can provide a summary of comments and feedback to those applicants. And we will focus our time on the day of the panel meeting on discussing those applications that kind of fall in the middle scoring range to prioritize and determine whether they will be considered for funding. That's why it's important that you at least read and are familiar with all the applications that you are not being asked to provide a preliminary score for. I'll send you a list of the ranked applications ahead of the meeting on the 28th, probably on the 27th after you submit your scores. And when you receive that list, if there are any applicants that are not being considered for funding that you want the group to discuss, we will provide you with an opportunity for a passion vote to bring something back in for consideration. That passion vote can come from either those that are being recommended for funding or that are not being considered. I'll provide more details when I send you that list, but that's why it's important that you read all and are familiar with all the applications ahead of time. So on the day of the meeting, we'll do brief introductions, provide a brief overview again of the process, and then we'll go through the applications that are up for discussion, asking the primary reader to lead off that discussion, followed by the secondary reader. We'll then open up that discussion for the full panel, and we will likely have about 10 minutes per application. That will depend on the number of applications for discussion. I've asked you to block off the full day just in case we have a large number to discuss, but we will provide lots of breaks and a full hour for lunch and end early if we have fewer applications than we thought. During that discussion, if you agree with what's already been said, you can just say, I agree, and only add a comment if you have something different or to add. And after the discussion, you will all be asked to provide scores during the day. We're not looking for consensus on those scores, and your scores will reflect the overall reaction of the panel. So if you feel that an application is really great, or another panelist feels that it's not so great, have that discussion, convince each other, and let your scores reflect your reactions. And your scores may differ from what you put in as preliminary scores in the overall, in your preliminary scoring submissions. When we're done, you'll have a chance to look back one last time, and then we will make any changes if you want to adjust anything, and then just be sure that your top applications and projects are reflected in your numbers. And at the end of the day, we'll have that final list of applicants from highest to lowest scoring. And this will be the list that we use to make our funding recommendations. And as a panel, you will be making funding recommendations as an advisory to our Board of Trustees, who will review and give final approval of those grants. But it will be okay to recommend partial funding, but we generally don't recommend going below 50% of the request, and maybe even 75% if an applicant is using only the grant to support their activities. So we can talk about that in the panel meeting, but just wanted you to know that partial funding is a possibility. So that's it for the orientation. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me via email or phone. I'm happy to discuss anything with you. And thank you for joining me. And like I said, don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. Thank you so much.